Hi, everyone, and welcome to the live recording of the Creative Confidence Podcast, where we talk with creative leaders about innovation, leadership, and growth. I'm your host, Mina Seetharaman, head of new ventures at IDEO and of the team here at IDEO U, and I'm delighted to be here today, as always, among this amazing community. Those of you who are regulars to the live recording, and I already see some of you doing it in the chat, know that we love to start by having you drop your name and location into the chat. So if you haven't done it already, please make sure to do it. I think the last time we did this, I was coming to you from our studio in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but today I'm back home, so I'm coming to you from just north of New York City. And Mike, I think you're coming to us from the Bay Area, but maybe not our studio?
That's correct. I am at home in Mill Valley, so just in Marin County, just north of San Francisco.
This is like one of my favorite parts of the show. Somebody is joining us from Nepal, someone from Portugal. There's always a great contingent from Canada representing, which makes me like feel a lot of love for my home. Someone from Toronto. I'm from Toronto. And folks from California, someone from Edinburgh, Scotland. It's amazing to me that so many of you give so much of your time to us. I feel like it's the most precious commodity we have. And so that you would spend your time with us, especially for those of you who are doing it really late at night. I can't tell you how much the folks at IDEO, you really appreciate it. So thank you so much for that. Today, we're going to be talking about the pursuit of creative excellence and what that means in today's landscape. Our guest, as you may have already guessed, is Mike Peng, the CEO of IDEO. He has spent nearly 2 decades at IDEO, leading teams across cultures and disciplines. He co-founded and launched IDEO Tokyo. Before becoming CEO, he also co-founded D4V, Design for Ventures, which was Japan's first design-focused venture capital fund. And he also spent 5 years at Moon Creative Lab as chief creative officer. His background spans neuroscience, business, and design, giving him a truly unique perspective on creativity and leadership. And he's also, as some of you might know, an instructor in IDEO U's Cultivating Creative Collaboration, a course where he teaches us how to lead teams with empathy, trust, and shared purpose. So today we're going to talk about how Mike's personal journey has shaped his leadership philosophy, what creative excellence means, especially today, and how to foster it on your team, how to stay inspired as a leader and build a culture of inspiration around you. As always, we will take your questions at the end, so please make sure to drop them into the chat as we go. And if you enjoy these live recordings, do make sure to sign up for the IDEOU newsletter, where we announce the upcoming schedule of all of these live recordings. And we do have some great guests planned for 2026. So, Mike, let's get started.
Let's do it.
I wanna talk a little bit about your personal journey to leadership. I think people love hearing about these, and you have worked across so many cultures and disciplines. We talked a little bit about how you went from neuroscience to startups to design. Can you take us back to the beginning of your journey and share what led you from studying the brain to leading a creative organization like ours?
Thanks for that, Mina. And hello, everyone. It's so nice to not get to see you, but I know you are connected here. So I'm really happy to be here today. Yeah, let's start. Let's start about the journey. I When I started college undergrad at UC Berkeley, um, not surprisingly, I was one of those, like, I'm an only child and, wanted to please my parents. And so started as pre-med, as many of us do. And of the subjects of pre-med, the part of the body that I was just always most interested in was the brain. So I had studied all these courses about the physical aspect of the brain, but much more with this idea of, I'll probably one day become a neurologist, I think was where I was going with that. But then when you go to a place like Berkeley, you have this ability to start taking classes in different disciplines. And I started learning that there is this thing called cognitive science, which was still brain heavy. You still get to learn a lot about the brain, but it was a much more interdisciplinary look at how the brain works. So instead of just taking courses in like molecular cell biology, which I did a lot, you also needed to take courses in computer science, linguistics, psychology, philosophy of the mind. And to me, this was one of these moments that I was like, wow, like I am way more interested in learning about the brain through multi aspects through different lenses than just the one way, which is just the physical, anatomy of the brain. And so then I decided to kind of switch over into cognitive science, which then enabled me to take courses from all these different amazing professors across these different disciplines, all looking at the brain in a slightly different way. And I think that was the beginning of this idea of actually there's something in this like interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary aspect that I'm really, really passionate about. So fast forward, I graduated and I was lucky enough to start working at Johnson and Johnson. Johnson and Johnson had this like leadership program in the information technology space, and the idea was you get to spend a year in a different operating company within J&J. And so Johnson and Johnson does pharmaceuticals, it does medical devices, and it does like consumer products. And so the idea is you would spend a year in kind of each of those, and then you get to choose where you want to get finally placed. And so that took me to Cincinnati, and I was in New Jersey at headquarters, and then I came back to the Bay Area at a company called Alza, which is a pharmaceutical drug delivery company. So they're really famous for the patch technology. So any type of
Wow.
patch technology and delivering drugs, that's what they were really known for. And there in the information technology department, one of my biggest projects was to introduce new technology to scientists who work at Alza. And I always thought that, okay, that's fascinating. And of course, you do what you do. You look at all the vendors that are out there. But for me, it didn't sit right that we would just introduce a technology and you would get all these like requirements documents from the scientist, and then you look for what type of technology best fit them. I felt like I needed to really understand what the life of a scientist is at Johnson and Johnson, at Alza. And so I decided I'm going to just spend days in the labs with the scientists, and I just want to see them. I want to see a day in the life of a scientist.
Oh my
And
gosh, you were IDEO before IDEO.
I know.
That's
And so
amazing.
this is what it's leading to, which is I was so fascinated by like, yes, requirements, sure, but like really like let's understand how scientists work, how do they spend their time or energy, what's frustrating. And so I was like side by side, lab coat, wearing my lab coat, hobnobbing with the scientists with that. And then I think the idea was actually one of the projects I was working on is like this idea around electronic lab notebooks, right? This is still in the days of paper where everyone's still writing down their experiments. And the problem is people are duplicating experiments, there's no collaboration and lessons learned across. And so is there an ability to actually move into the electronic lab notebook space? And so it was through this that like through this observation that I felt like, okay, here's the best solution and here's why, because it's not just what people have listed out as the requirements, but this is how we can incorporate it into their daily lives. So how IDEO? I think it all started actually back in school. My roommate came to me one day from a business school class with a VHS tape. This is dating me, but it's a VHS tape of the Nightline shopping cart video. And he came back with this videotape and he said, Mike, I think this is your future job. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And so I started watching it. And I remember that to be such a transformative moment in my life where I couldn't believe there's a company that existed that was solving some of the most complex challenges for other companies, having a great time, being creative. And it was all about human centricity. You have to understand people. And it was this moment when in the video, I think they were saying the different types of people that make up the company. And one of the types of disciplines was cognitive sciences that they were looking for. And as a cognitive science major, I was like, what do people do with a cognitive science degree besides going into research? And I'm like, they join IDEO. This is my calling. And so after J&J, I got the lucky chance to interview with IDEO. I got accepted and I started as a design researcher in our San Francisco office. Then got a chance to go help start our New York office in the early days and was there for a few years really leading our design research practice. And then got this amazing experience to start our Tokyo office. And so I went to Japan and, I was craving to be kind of employee number one to really think about what is it what is required to build out a new instantiation of an IDEO office? Who are all the talent we're going to bring in? What are we going to do a little bit different? What's the space that we were going to inhabit? What's the community we were going to build? And I spent nearly a decade in Japan. Um, and this is where, towards the end of the decade, we had this amazing chance to work with Mitsui and Co., which is one of the largest
Mm, yeah.
trading and investment firms in Japan. And they were looking, as a trading investment firm, they were looking and thinking about the future of their organization. And they believed that, yes, trading and investing is always going to be our core bread and butter. But if we don't learn how to really create new businesses from the ground up, other people are going to take our lunch. And so we need to build this capacity to be able to do that. And we believe that utilizing design thinking, human centeredness is the way to build these businesses. And so they had come to IDEO to build out this new venture studio that would help them build new businesses. And IDEO Tokyo, can you help us? And so over the last few years, while I was in Japan, helped them build that out. And that's when they asked me to come over and say, hey, will you be our chief creative officer? We need someone with your experience to help us figure out how to build this thing. And I think those 5 years that I was at Moon was incredible because I got to see what it was like to be on the other side of
Right.
IDEO's work, right? We had done a bunch of work, helped create the studio, and now like it's the real hard work comes in the execution of these new business ideas. And I was really proud of the work and continue to be proud of the work that Moon does on behalf of Mitsui and Co. And then got a call and said, "Hey, we are looking for the next generation of IDEO. Would you be interested in interviewing for the position?" I had always this is something in the IDEO water, but once you drink the water, you never go too far from it. So I was always still really, when you're at IDEO, it's a place that it's such formative years for a person there because it's such family. And so I always kept in touch with folks and was always so curious about what IDEO was continuing to do, even when I wasn't there. And got the chance to interview for the position and yeah, accepted the role. And now it's been about 5 months. And
My
I
gosh, has it only been 5
only five
months?
months. I know it feels like 5 years, right, Mina? But it's this accumulation of, I think, all these sets of experiences,
Yeah.
since school that I think really kind of led me to where I am today.
It's as I was listening to you tell your story, I mean, I had a lot of thoughts. I'm glad you came because I think it has been a busy 5 months, but kind of a great 5 months as well. And I was thinking though, reflecting on your story, that your story is such, it seems like from the outside in, if you've never worked anywhere like IDEO, you think, what an atypical path to where you are now. But in fact, I think it's very reflective of so many IDEOers stories, both their interesting sort of journeys to IDEO and their interesting journeys within IDEO. And I often say that I think this is sort of what makes us amazing at what we do as a company. And sometimes I think it's actually what clients are buying and don't realize they're buying until they start working with us. That these varied experiences really help us to tap into perspectives and ideas where people don't even think those things would exist. Like we just look under rocks that people don't even think are interesting rocks. I just think it means we have people who in the healthcare space who've been actual clinicians. There's a magician who works at like it's just so interesting to me the way that those varied backgrounds come to bear in our day-to-day work in the service of our clients.
I think that's absolutely right. I think so much of the magic of the work that we get to do comes out when you bring different types of people together from varied backgrounds and experiences. It's always the belief around creativity. Creativity, if you have the same type of people in a room, you're going to get the same type of answers.
Yes.
If you're able to bring together different types of people who, not unlike the cognitive science major, you're approaching it from slightly different lenses,
Mhm.
that's where I feel like you really get the magic. And that's where you get novel ideas that you would never have been able to come up with if it's just people like you.
Yeah, 100% agree. I wanted to talk a little bit about your that specifically when you started to think of yourself as a leader. And what surprised you most in that transition from sort of individual contributor or team member to becoming a leader?
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. I think there's many different types of leadership, and from my past and experiences, I've always felt leaderly. But I think what you're asking is like, there's a specific moment that I think in my life that really where everything kind of came together, and I think it was right at the moment where I went to go start IDEO Tokyo. So the
Mhm.
fuller story is myself and another person, Sunjin, who's the managing director of IDEO Tokyo at the time. It was the two of us who started it, and it was amazing. And after a year, he ended up having to come back to the Bay Area. Um, I was still quite young. I had spent, about at that time, probably like 5 or 6 years at IDEO. So I was young in age and also relatively young in IDEO career. And there was a moment where I think IDEO had to make a decision, which is, okay, well, if we no longer have this managing director, do we ask someone at IDEO to go and lead the studio, or do we leave the country because we just don't think we have the right leadership to actually lead and build studio there? And IDEO took a risk. IDEO took a risk on someone like myself. I had a co-managing director, Davide, who I'd worked with prior, and he came over from the Bay Area, and the two of us ended up, building IDEO Tokyo together. The reason I say there's different types of leadership is like, I've led projects before. I led the craft of design research as a discipline before at IDEO, but I think building and leading a studio is one of those types of positions where all the different types of leadership has to come together. You need to
Right.
know how to run a P&L. You need to know how to attract clients and get them excited to work with you. You have to really nurture your talent and figure out a growth path for everyone. And it's about like you as the leader are there in service of all these different aspects and the ability to orchestrate. And as a dancer, the idea of choreography, the ability to actually, like, you are the choreographer that's really trying to not necessarily make all the decisions, but to choreograph the dance so that they all work in concert with each other. I felt like being the managing director of IDEO Tokyo really enabled me to see all facets of that leadership and bring it together as good as it could possibly be. And I think that was a really big moment because it was about business, it was about creativity, it was about talent. And we know this from leading studios. There's some big decisions that need to be made, but it's a bunch of tiny little decisions that you have to have a perspective on. And how do you shape that while you're still trying to figure yourself out as a leader? And so that was a big moment, I think, for myself.
Yeah, that's a really excellent example because I think there's such a you're right, like you lead in different ways. Um, and from different perspectives all throughout your career. But there's a really big difference between leading people who are potentially more junior versions of yourself. For example, so like I think about the creative director leading art directors who come from the same background as they come from versus that person then stepping into more of a business head role, right? Like it tests new skills or maybe forces you to develop new skills. One of the things that you've talked about that I really appreciated is sort of this idea of like it's not knowing all the answers, but actually like creating conditions for people to help figure out the answers and thrive. And I think that's such a very kind of holistic leadership approach in some ways. I really appreciate that because I think it's really true. There are too many complex things nowadays for one person to know all the answers.
I think that's right. I think another metaphor I use a lot is to be more of a compass as opposed to being a
Mm,
map. Because you can have an exact map and it can tell you to turn left, turn right, and of course you can make all the decisions that way and lead an organization that way. But a compass is much more directionally are we going in the right way, and yet how we get there, there's many different ways to get there. I think that when you first step into leadership roles, I think you think your role is to have all the answers and make decisions. And I think it's actually a lot more complex than that. As you mentioned, I think it's about setting a vision and direction and getting and building a shared understanding of that, but really using the talent that you have to kind of figure out exactly what's the right path to get there.
It's making me think about my first in-person team meeting with the IDEO team actually when I started. And they were asking me about a time when I'd led a team through change. I hope they don't mind me sharing this story, actually. But a time when I'd led a team through change. And in that moment, I realized, like, oh, I'm often hired to do that. But I remembered a prior team where the team just felt very demoralized and they all thought like they thought small about themselves, but I could see all of their talents. And I wanted them to aim bigger. I wanted them to really do something different. And I said to them, okay, here's what we're going to do. They were operating from a place of fear. And so I said, here's what we're going to do. You're going to take the risk and I'm going to take the blame. And they all just went, what? And I said, you're going to come up with an idea. You have the answers. I can't do the job you do. And if I believe in that idea and the risk we're taking, then I'm happy to also take the blame. Like that's what we do as leaders, right? And and that was the first year they were able to submit work to Cannes because it was good enough, we
Mhm.
thought, to submit to like and it was really that notion of like, I'm gonna set a direction, we're gonna create some conditions, and you're gonna maybe believe in yourselves a little bit. But it wasn't me doing the work or deciding what they would do. And um I think that's a you're right. Like, as new leaders, we often think we have to have all the answers, but actually, we sort of need to know how to, like, cultivate the answers from the people around us. It's a good approach. You're right.
Absolutely.
When you first started, as CEO, early on, you shared these 3 personal philosophies with all of us, and I was wondering if you would mind walking us through what they were, and not just what they meant to you personally, but also from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, sure. I, IDEO is not dissimilar to other organizations in which I've always felt that um, you need to really understand the person before any of the things that they're saying or any of the decisions that they're making. You can actually not only empathize with it, but you can actually truly understand why those decisions were made. And so even though I was coming back to IDEO, having been at IDEO for, 14 years before, things have changed, right? A lot of things have changed. There's different people too. So I felt it really important to have a shared understanding, to have everyone in the company have a shared understanding of here are some things that I, as Mike Peng, just kind of believe in. This is general philosophy of how I think about the world. And my hope, and this was all in the parentheses, but my hope is that if you understand some of these philosophies, things that I say and do will start making sense because you'll know that these are just the general philosophies that I sort of believe in. And so they're not all at the same level, but I picked three that I felt like were really important in this particular moment. One is about fewer but better. This is throughout my life and my experience, but I find that as people, we can only hold so much. So, if you have like 10 things you want to do, if other people can't mention what those 10 things are, it's moot. And so I've always believed that we got to pick a few things that we really want to work on. But let's do each of those things better because that focus and that discernment, I think, is going to be really, really important to get us over that line. So that was one philosophy that I shared. A second philosophy I shared is one that it's not mine, but I was doing a lot of reading, and there was a person named David Perel who came up with this concept of personal monopoly. And so personal monopoly is this kind of concept that how do you take the unique set of skills, experiences, know how, personality, disposition? How do you take all of those things about you and make you the only person who can do what you can do? And I think we've heard this concept before, but when I heard about it as captured as personal monopoly, it got me thinking I am a unique person who has a set of experiences and a certain type of personality and disposition. And if you know that of me, you will start understanding why I think this is where I can uniquely contribute to the leadership of this organization. So that was another philosophy that I really, really believed in. And then the third is a general philosophy I have around creativity. And it's this idea around combinatorial creativity. And you'll start seeing this thread come from, my days at school, which is this idea that actually creativity comes from connecting various disparate ideas and experiences and then remixing and remashing them in different ways. Nothing is truly new. Everything is just coming from different things. And so if we experience more in the world, if we see more things of the world, if we're more curious about the world, surely we're increasing our database that when we actually need to create new ideas, we can pick and choose the best parts and kind of mix them in some creative way as an output. And so because of that, that's also knowing that that's a philosophy that I really believe in. Where I want to take IDEO is in a place where we are putting ourselves in positions where we're collecting and we're curious and we're out in the world and we're really learning because that building those set of shared experiences is how we're actually going to become more creative, not only for ourselves, but for our clients. And so these three kind of philosophies became the underpinning of then what I presented soon after was okay, with these three philosophies and three observations I have around IDEO and the industry we're in, here's this one visual metaphor that I believe we as IDEO should be achieving. And then here are six hunches, bets that I think we might make in order to achieve this vision that I believe in. And so, but all of that could not, I feel like of course, I could have jumped all the way into here are the six things that I think we need to do. But without that shared understanding of these philosophies, I think it wouldn't have landed. I don't think people would have truly understood why we're going in this direction and why Mike is taking us in this direction.
Yeah, I felt like that, I remember that presentation really well, and I go back to it on occasion, actually. I felt like it was good for a number of reasons. I think it definitely helped us to understand where you were coming from and where you were taking us, which I think is always a great in general, but I definitely think at a place like IDEO is helpful. Um, uh because we're very much a company that thinks about the why, and so I think that helps. But the other thing that I really liked about it was, uh it sort of connected your humanity and your leadership, which those 2 things don't always show up together in the workplace, right? I don't I mean, I've worked at many places where, leaders try and keep those things very separate, and so I thought it was a really interesting way of illustrating those 2 things together, um, which for me as an individual was kind of, and as a leader was meaningful, and I thought it helped me sort of I return to those 3 philosophies often. I think they're a really good focal point for us because I'll think about, "Oh, I have this great idea," and then I look at it through the lens of the philosophies. I'm like, "This is not a great idea." You know what I mean? So I think it is helpful, to have those things that you share with people. I think it's really great as a leader to do that.
I also feel like, and maybe this is for other leaders out there, uh, so many of us have been part of organizations where there are new visions, new strategies of where we want to go. And I think you're right, Mina. I think people are really curious around the why behind it. I find sharing your own philosophies to be such a storytelling anchor. Like it
Mm.
really helps you communicate exactly your perspective and the why behind it because I think you don't have to make it a direct correlation, but it starts making a little bit more sense. This is what Mike believes in. Thus, I can totally see why we are going in this direction. And you don't have to agree with the directions, but if you understand where I'm coming from or what I believe in, you start being like, oh, I definitely understand. I understand how we can have gotten there. And it opens up to suggestions, right? Which is like, maybe these aren't the right six bets, but now that I understand what Mike believes in, maybe there's a better idea that can come out of that based on that foundation. And so I find that from a storytelling, especially for storytelling for influence and for impact, I think, sharing your own personal philosophies is maybe a great way to kind of set that foundation.
I totally want to do a plug for storytelling for influencer course right now. You just led me straight there, but I'm not going to do it. I mean, I guess I just did it, but that's fine. I want to talk about this notion of creative excellence that you have been sharing with us as well. You've talked about how our magic at IDEO, at least part of it, lies in our pursuit of creative excellence. What does that mean to you, especially in this day and age?
Creative excellence is one of my favorite topics, and it's a topic that I also don't feel like it's spoken about a lot. But I want to break down what you just said, Mina, because I think there's creative excellence, and then I think there's the pursuit of creative
Mhm.
excellence. And
Yes.
I'm really interested in the pursuit of creative excellence because I think in the notion of creative excellence is like we never actually get there, but it's around pursuing creative excellence is actually how we're going to get more out of it. And so I
Right.
think that pursuit is really important. And so another way to put it is I don't think you ever reach that destination of I'm creatively excellent. I think you it's a practice, it's a craft. It's something that you continuously have to work on and nurture. And yet if you keep on pursuing that excellence, that's actually how you're going to become much better at what that is. And so yeah, I think a lot of this, I think, is having spent a lot of time in Japan as well.
Mhm.
There is a term called shokunin, which kind of translates to like the craftsman, the master craftsman. And so people who dedicate their whole lives to a specific craft and just, they have apprentices and they learn from, and then they're just like constantly working on that craft over and over and over again. And having spent a lot of time in Japan, I there's this it's poetic. It's something that I feel like all of us should strive to try and do something over and over again so we just become a little bit better at it. And at a place like IDEO where we are, there's many people who, or many organizations who maybe have a lot of business excellence and are doing a lot for the market. Our goal is to match that business excellence with what I believe is this pursuit of creative excellence. If we can bring these together, this is where I think the magic of IDEO lies. And so there's many elements to this pursuit that I think are important to share. Should I start digging in?
Yeah, of course. I think people want to hear them. Absolutely.
And again, this is not, I haven't, it's not an exhaustive list, and there's probably more and better and different ones. But when we think about the pursuit of creative excellence, I think there's a few, I don't know, it's like tenets of this pursuit that I think are good to note. I think one is about continuous learning.
Mhm.
Uh, you this is about maintaining this sort of growth mindset and that you don't ever truly know at all, and so you must continue to be curious and you must be continuously learning in order to get there. So I think this is one of the fundamental tenets of the pursuit of creative excellence. Another one that I think is maybe interesting and unconventional, I think, when you think about creative excellence, is this idea around having healthy friction. I think a lot of people think about when they think about, oh, when you're creatively excellent, you're in flow. You're just like, it's just ideas are just like coming out all the time. And as much as I would love to say that, 90% of my time is in flow, it's not. And in fact, how to get to that flow is actually through healthy friction. At IDEO, we have an organization, the Play Lab, who really looks at play as this like incredible discipline and designing for play. And one of the notions of play is there is no play without friction. There is
Absolutely.
no play. You do not have fun if you can just solve it really easily, solve something
Yeah.
really easily and just go. You need to, bring in that healthy friction. And it's the same for creative excellence, which is you need tension, you need friction, because that's how you sharpen your mindset. That's how you're able to get to the other side, is because you have those tensions that, keep you on edge in order to figure out what's the, how to get across it. Another tenet is just around constant experimentation. In order to be on the edge of any sort of craft, you have to continue to experiment and try new things. And the key, though, is trying new things where you actually don't know the result.
Yeah.
And I think this is where it gets tricky, because I think we try new things, but oftentimes you probably have a sense of what's going to happen. I think the thing about experimentation, true experimentation, is that we have a hunch, we have a hypothesis, but we are open to total failure because it's going to teach us something. And I think it's only that failure that's going to help us grow. So I think running true experiments is really key to the pursuit of creative excellence. Teaching. Yeah, I don't think it's a belief I have, but I think it's actually part of just learning as a discipline. But in order to really learn, you kind of have to see something once, you then do something, and then you don't really learn that subject until you actually have to start teaching it to other people. And so the idea of passing on that knowledge also helps you sharpen what and articulate the things that you yourself are learning and reflecting on. And so I think that passing on of knowledge is actually really key to this pursuit of creative excellence. And then there's like two that I would put together, but this is the idea around self-awareness and discernment. You cannot truly get excellent until you know exactly what you're good at and what you're not. And you have to be really honest with yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not to say you have to only work on your weaknesses and, only strengthen your strength. No, but I think you have to have a really good understanding of the things that you know about yourself and the things that make you work, because this is how you will be able to know the difference between good versus great. I think, and this is not a conversation about AI, but I can't help but think that with the advent of new technologies, we are raising the bar of good. I think there's a lot of things that are going to look really, really good. What's going to turn that good to being incredibly great is actually much more difficult. And so I think the pursuit of creative excellence is trying to really understand what good looks like, but what great looks like as well.
Right.
And then finally, I would just say underpinning all of these tenets is this idea around humility. Um, Once you say, like I mentioned before, once you think you've reached Mecca, you have not. You're obviously not there. Like you are a continuous learner. You know that you're truly never a master, and you probably won't ever get there. But boy, you're gonna try. You're gonna do whatever you can to try and get as good as you can. And that humility, I think, is the underpinning for all these different aspects of creative excellence.
I It's a lot. Like, I'm sort of digesting everything that you shared, but one of the things that I really like about this is this notion. I like that you frame it as creative excellence, because I think a lot of times, um, folks talk a lot about craft and only craft, but I think sometimes craft is positioned as something very precious, and it's almost used in a way to sort of distance ourselves from the discomfort. And I think the pursuit of creative excellence, the way you've described it, actually forces you to live a little bit in the discomfort. Like, you may never achieve creative excellence. It's not about perfection. It really is about the pursuit of progress in what you're doing. And it's not that the craft doesn't matter. It's not that technique doesn't matter. Skill sets matter. The changing landscape, AI will force us to figure out what is it in our craft that helps us to lift things to that next stage of truly great. But instead of thinking about using craft as a way of separating ourselves, these combinations of things like discernment and humility and self-awareness force us to really kind of dig in deep, I think, in this sense of pursuit. And so I feel like it almost brings us closer to the discomfort in a way that drives real progress. I really like looking at it that way, actually. I want to talk a little bit too um, about the fact that at IDEO, like I think IDEO is a super interesting place because we talk about having creative people and designers, but the range of people we have is really incredible. Like we have mechanical engineers, industrial designers, viscom designers, neuroscientists. Like just the range of people is incredible. And I'm wondering how you inspire creative excellence across such a diverse group of people.
Um, I'm forever grateful to be part of an organization that has so many amazing and creative people. And I think one of the things that, in order to really inspire such a diverse group of people, it's heavily around context. Context is another piece that I love to dig into because I think if you heard me just say everything I said without and just said, "Oh, we're just going to do exactly that," that's not necessarily right because it really is dependent on timing and it's really dependent on where the organization is at this current moment. And so, where true leadership of creative excellence comes in is knowing you have tools, you have levers, when to use them. And sometimes it's about, hey, you know what? We need to roll up our sleeves and we need to get business stuff done. We need to be much more productive. We need to be faster. Yet other times it's about, you know what? This is a moment about the art of creativity. Let's actually spend a little bit more time trying something new. Let's actually let's deepen the quality of this idea because I don't think it's quite there. Let's actually go a bit deeper. Like we've kind of gone a bit broad, but like let's actually go a bit deeper. And so I think at steady state, you want all of this to be in tension with each other. But because oftentimes that's not, I think your job as a leader when it comes to a diverse set of organization is to really understand where the organization is and then being able to on the moment pull out these different sets of tools and different types of mindsets exactly at the right moment for where you need to meet people and you need to meet where the organization is. And so I think that choreography of the ebb and flow is actually something to be really, really aware about because it's rarely in the state where actually we can be totally in balance. It's always slightly off balance. And your job as a leader is to really understand where the organization is and in order to then be able to flex in different aspects and different times.
I want to talk also a little bit about this notion of finding inspiration. Um, you have talked about the idea of your job as a leader is actually to make sure that you stay inspired so that you can inspire others. How do you do that in practice?
Yeah, I think I credit, I don't know who originally said this. I think I'm going to credit Tim Brown to this because I think this is where I heard it. And he said, our job as creative leaders is to stay inspired so that we can inspire others. I have never felt more permission um, in a creative organization to be told, actually, your job is to stay inspired. Go find inspiration. And each person, how they find inspiration might be slightly different, but your job is to be inspired because how can you possibly inspire others, clients, organizations, team members, if you yourself are not inspired? And so I think that has always been an underpinning of like something that has stayed with me for a long time. The good news is, I think one of my greatest assets is I can find anything interesting. I can find, like everything is interesting to me, and uh, I I like to be at the edges of things. That's where I find inspiration. It's in these edges, and by edges I mean. Mina, you probably know this better than anyone, but I am so one with the global zeitgeist of where we are in pop culture. You want to talk Real Housewives? I got you. You want to talk about K-pop Demon Hunters? I got you. Um, Wicked's coming out. you want to talk about all the
Cartoon. Yeah,
outfits they're
yeah.
wearing on on all the promos. I got you too. Like I find there's something in the understanding where the mass is and what's getting people excited that I find actually really really inspiring. And then on the other side, there's this sort of the side of the being esoteric, right? And you know, this holiday, I'm actually going back to Japan, and I'm staying at a place that used to be an old tatami shop.
Oh, wow.
And to me, the story of how they created this inn that it's over 100 years old, that originally created tatami for all the different, different houses. Like, I'm just so excited to learn more and to talk to the owners and to really understand. So, on both ends of this sort of like really like what's getting everyone so hyped, and let's learn about the vibes that are out there, and then let's go quiet and really understand this, this beautiful story, a poetry of how this inn came from this master of the tatami craft. These edges I think are actually what inspire me, and so being able to constantly being on these extremes is where I feel like I personally get a lot of inspiration.
Yeah, I was thinking this as you were telling us at the very top of the show about your journey through Berkeley, and I was like, I am not surprised at all that where you ended up in your educational journey because you are a person who just like wants to connect so many dots, and so this is not surprising to me at all. Um, Years ago, just because you'd mentioned Tim Brown, I just thought about this. He wrote a piece in Sherm about the changing nature of C-suite leadership and how CEOs. What it reminds me of is I really think about this notion of the end of hero leadership, right? Like what the idea that one person has all the answers. And he wrote this piece about how C-suite leaders needed to rethink how they were leading, that they probably needed sort of these kind of coalitions of advisors to help them become better leaders in this day and age. And you have talked about how for you leadership is not a solo act, and I would love to for you to talk a little bit about the sort of role of community and collaboration and how you lead.
Yeah, I've always just believed that you're only as good as the company that you keep. And as a creative leader, and as someone who knows they don't have all the answers, you have to start establishing groups of people that you can always go out to and, share your ideas in hopes that they're going to come back with something and be able to, to spar, in that way. And so, yeah, for myself, I think there's many different types of groups. There's from the Tim Browns and David Kellys, who I still meet on a biweekly basis, which is one of my favorite sets of meetings, right? Just to have a coffee
I
chat
bet.
with yeah, with them. And you'd be surprised. Not all of it's about talking about IDEO, but it's really just like trying to understand what they're inspired by, and maybe there's a seed in there that's kind of interesting. I still have monthly conversations with Jane Fulton Surrey. Jane Fulton Surrey, for those of you that might not know, I consider her the mother of design research. It is because of her that this idea around really trying to understand people for design, it's her kind of perspective, and so she's someone I connect with monthly basis. She was really into also biomimicry and this idea around nature being inspiration. And I just saw this piece on New York Times that has this beautiful illustrations of how nature has inspired inventions that we, in man-made world, we've created, and I find that to be fascinating. Even still kind of tangential to the IDEO community, I have this goal of creating the League of Extraordinary Alumni of IDEO,
I
is
feel
what
like
I
they
call
need
it.
shirts and
I would
capes
love it.
too.
No,
There's
for
something
sure.
awesome about that.
I mean, we have an amazing community. There are alumni who have come through IDEO and have gone on to do incredible, incredible things in the world. I would love to just like, get their brain power and say, hey, you've been at a place like this. Like, how do we kind of continue to build on this amazing organization? What would you change? What did you learn now that you've left the nest? I think, that's a group of people that I'd love to stay connected with. And of course, I think there's like, I call them your daily life team.
Mm, yeah.
I really, I thought a lot about this, and maybe when you're living in a different culture, um, you start you definitely you see the world in a different way. But I found, despite being able to be relatively fluent in Japanese in certain occasions, especially ordering food and getting a taxi, but you're in your mind a lot, and so I've really relied on what I call like the people that you interact with on your daily life that you don't even know are supporting you, but the fact that they're there and you interact with them support you in this amazing way. So that was the barista that I went to every day when I grabbed coffee. There's some comfort in that and the conversations that we had. That was great. I got really into Pilates, and so my Pilates instructor in Tokyo is someone that every time I see her, it inspires me to think about movement in new ways. And there's certain philosophies in Pilates that I actually still keep with me on a daily basis. That's not just about my body, but even how I think about balance and making sure that things are in check. These people that are seemingly just part of your daily lives, I think, is really critical to the success of you as a leader. And so don't discount all of this in your life. It's really, really important to have these set of people be surrounding you in order to actually help you thrive.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to do a quick recap and then we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. There are so many
Sure.
questions. Um, so, our quick recap, a few key takeaways here. Leadership is a practice, it's not a position. Mike reminded us that becoming a leader isn't about having all the answers, it's really about creating the conditions for others to thrive and grow. Creative excellence is a pursuit, not a destination. True mastery isn't about perfection, it's about curiosity, humility, and continuous learning, staying in motion, experimenting, and finding the edge between creativity and craft. And finally, stay inspired to inspire others. As leaders, our ability to energize teams starts with our own sense of wonder. Whether it's global travel, small daily rituals, or a league of extraordinary alumni, I love that phrase. Mike shows that how surrounding yourself with sources of inspiration can fuel your creative leadership. Okay, I'm going to jump to some questions from the audience. Um, Hannah has asked us, leading people from so many different cultures, backgrounds, and experiences, how do you deal with resistance to change when introducing the newly designed approaches? How do you go through conflict with them?
Yeah, I think, and what more extreme society than in my experience in Japan, um, for those of you that maybe have spent time in Japan, from a business perspective, it's actually quite interesting, right? Because Japan got really successful during the age of what we call kaizen, which is like basically continuous improvement. It's about going
Mhm.
from 1 to 100, and so they're really good from let's say from the Toyota manufacturing days of being able to like really eliminate any defects by just trying new things to really just to make perfect it as much as possible. Trying to get a set of leaders who've understood Kaizen as the way of success and trying to tell them, actually, now we need to go from 0 to 1. And this is about not optimizing for defects. This is about coming up with something completely new, novel. You have to do this totally different. And so I think so much of it is in I have complete empathy to why organizations are the way they are and what made them successful. I think the key is to really clearly explain the way you've been leading business is really good at certain set of things. Trust us as leaders in the creative activity that actually to get to something new and novel, you have to try something different. You have to use new different types of tools. You have to take some leaps that you might not have been able to do before and then to go do them. And not unlike how we teach our kids how to do things, like it's gonna be hard. There's gonna be adverse reactions all the time. I think the proof is in the pudding, though. I think when you take a group of people and you run them through some of these sessions and to give them a sense of what this experience is like to come up with something new, they soon realize that, yes, there is no way that if we kept going on the way we are, we're going to be able to come up with something new. You just have to have different types of inputs. You just have to do things in a slightly different way. And so I think the act of actually going through it is so important. I remember I was leading a workshop with Panasonic, and one of the themes, the briefs of this workshop is to kind of create new, now something new in mobility, in the mobility space. But for pregnant mothers, you have a room full of men, of Japanese men, and you're asking them to create, let's say, new mobility, to think about other people, right, that are not necessarily themselves. And so what we did is we had them carry kind of like the Bjorns, and then we put like a 10 kilogram kind of rice bag in
Oh my
there.
gosh.
We had them push strollers where they had to do it through the rain. It was raining that day. And so, and we said, go on this exercise, go observe what it's like, and, have some empathy for the people that who you're designing for, and then come back to us, and then let's talk about what can you imagine. And I think that act of them having to do these things, and then they realize, oh, I had no idea that in order to get to an elevator into the subway station, I needed to walk so much further than where I was today. You just, things that you just don't notice because you've never had to think from different perspectives. And so I've always found it really important to, the best way in influence and convincing people is to have them actually go through the actions, and soon they will see how powerful it is themselves.
Um, okay, so we have so many questions. I think we're going to have to do an asked and answered with you, which
Okay,
is a
perfect.
second episode. So we'll
Sure.
do that because
No
we
problem.
really, there are probably like 50 questions here. And I do want to do a little bit of a wrap and then also a little bit of a lightning round so people can learn just that little bit more about you. So
Sure.
thank you for this amazing conversation. The comments in the chat are so appreciative. We'll do the lightning round. So I want you to sort of get ready to
Okay.
prepare yourself for this. Um, and before you do that, I'll just do a quick little wrap up with our audience with some reminders. If you'd like to go deeper into these ideas that Mike has shared, definitely check out his course with IDEO, Cultivating Creative Collaboration. You can also check out our December run of the Creative Leadership Workshop, where many of the principles from Mike's course are shared in a 2.5 hour workshop form. You can find details for both courses at IDEOU.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to the Creative Confidence Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you have a moment, please consider rating and reviewing our podcast to help others find us. Okay, are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. What book, TV show, or movie would you recommend to our listeners?
Let's see. Well, if you want something that's soothing, that really calms you down and just makes you feel so good at the end of the night, Great British Bake Off.
Mm.
Must. I mean, we're on season, I don't know, like 13, but incredible. It just makes me feel like a much better person after I watch that show. If you want, if you want to learn a thing or two around strategy, watch Survivor. My other favorite reality show. I've watched Survivor since season 1, and I'm obsessed. I just find it to be fascinating. Yeah, I just find it to be
Excellent.
fascinating. So
All
those are
right.
two TV shows that I would really highly recommend.
Okay. Who's a creative thinker you look up to?
Hmm. This is probably, yeah, this is a weird answer maybe. I've really been into the work of Ryan Holiday. And this is why it's going to be an unconventional answer. Ryan Holiday is not a necessary. I don't think he would ever say himself as a creative leader, but he is an expert in stoicism. And
Oh,
I find that if you read all the books that he's published, it's all the foundations to actually how to be much more creative. It's incredible. It's actually not about the creative acts, but if you really immerse yourself into the world of stoicism, you realize that actually these tenets actually help you become much more creative. So really a kind of weird answer, maybe.
that sounds interesting to me. What skill are you currently working on?
Oh, I'm just trying to let go more.
Oh my God.
I know, Mina, I think you and I are of the same ilk. It's just hard. And also I think it's a learning journey for me. You can't control everything as much as you want to. And it's like, what are the things that you kind of just are able to let go, which actually is a point of stoicism that I've actually trying to adopt, because I think it's very, very important as a leader that you are able to know when and where to let go.
Hmm. Okay, I think I'm going to have to add him to my reading list. What's a skill you're proud of?
I have quite a lot of grit and
Mm.
resilience. I think this is from the millions of tennis balls that I used to hit as a kid over and over and over again. Um, there's just something like I can resist pain in order to know that there is a better ending to all of this. And so, yeah, I think that has gotten me really, really far in my life.
What's a mistake you've learned from?
Not making enough mistakes.
Mm. Yeah.
It's the opposite side of, I think, in the pursuit for perfection, it's terrible. It's terrible that that I haven't tried to make more mistake, not tried, but like just like made more mistakes in my life, because I actually find those to be, as we know, huge growth learning moments. And I wish I did more of that when I was young.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I think maybe the opposite side of that coin, perfection is overrated. I think coloring outside of the lines is way more interesting, and it will make you way more interesting as an adult. So, as much as there is this, a desire to fit in and belong. Ultimately, what's going to get you further in life is actually why you're different.
I 100% agree with that and wish I'd figured it out sooner in life as well. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today. The folks that, like, if the chat's any indication, people really enjoyed everything you shared with us. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today as well. A little bit longer of an episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you all next time on Creative Confidence.